When I look back, when I left the Merchant Navy in 1945 and took a job as an elevator boy, yes, I met people. I hear stories about New York being a cold, bleak place, very rude, but it was not so with me. Every person who came home on a Saturday night or a weekend, they'd bring a bar of chocolate, a little bag of cakes, and the cupboard underneath the operator's seat was full of stuff that I couldn't even use. And then after the hold-up in New York, one lady in the building said, "Oh, that was an awful thing to happen, be held up with a gun in the morning. You must come and live in a place that's safer. We've got a room in our apartment." So I lived in the apartment where I worked. And all those kind of things endears me to New York. I hear people say, "Oh, we've got to go." Oh, yes, it has its drawbacks like every other place. You've got to move with the crowd, but there's always something exciting doing. More so than London. London was quite substantial and more to my liking. Afternoon tea and things like that and tinkle of cups. Yes, that suits me much better than flashy cocktail bars, photographs being taken. All right. But it got a little bit tiresome. But I still have a soft spot for New York. And a friend of mine went just recently, and I said, "Will you go to see if there's a place called Forest Chambers on the corner of 113th Street in Broadway?" I got all the photographs, came back. There was the 2 elevators that I attended to. There was the marble floor that I had to scrub before I finished my job. And I got $45 a week. But it was an interlude away from the radio. And then in Ghana, being with Pan American Airways, yes, a prestigious job. You met lots of people. I liked that very much indeed. And getting back to black people, I love the way they light up, and they've been a kind of a stabilizing effect on my entire life. People say, "Oh, how could you sort of fit in with but even in London, they had the Silver Slipper Club, and I met many famous people there. One or two that I kept in touch with for a long time. Bob Kreska, he was the cameraman for Odd Man Out, and Margaret Rutherford, and Vivian Lee, and Kay Kendall. I don't know whether you remember Kay Kendall, and she was Rex Harrison's wife. And I love Kay Kendall very much, but she went on a slimming diet, and it killed her. She died quite young. And all these people in the film industry I met in London, Sammy Davis, he came in one night quite distressed. He said, "I never thought it would happen in London." He said, "As I was coming in the door, a woman spat in my face." She said, "Oh, goodness me." That was quite, he said, awful. He said, "I love London," he said, "but the other things that happen like that," he said, "well," but the Silver Slipper Club was one of the highlights of my stay there. But there's so many things in London. I always think if you're tired of London, you're tired of life. I forget who it was who said that, but it's a city that you find strange when you go there. When I first went there, I found it very sort of stiff and off. People didn't say hello on the street. "How are you?" You wouldn't dream of saying that, but it's different now. But at that time, but when you got to know how things worked, it was quite nice. And all the other places, no, I can't say that I didn't enjoy them. I wasted time. I should have studied the piano and singing. That would have been more satisfactory to me, but I didn't. So therefore, at 50, some decision had to be made. I mean, you're not going to live forever. When you get to 50, well, of course, these days, anyone under 90 is a teenager. So my job, the company's job was just to buy the wool from Australia. It was a French company, big company. They buy the wool and have it processed. What happens after that was nothing to do with the office at all. They just bought the wool and how much it would yield and what it was worth. And everything was done in code. It was so secretive that all the catalogues that you had was IL was 16, IS was 12. I remember all these numbers, and that 1 to 10 was I should try. If you work that out, there's 10 in that. So that was how what they call the catalogue work. But it was interesting in its own way, and especially the holidays, 20 weeks holiday. Who gets 20 weeks holiday? But I made use of it in a way, in my own way. And, that was the beginning of the wanderlust. But then at 50, as I said before, it was time to call a halt. I looked at the bank, there's nothing in the bank, had a good time. Oh, yes, in my own way. But what's going to happen? So when I came here, I never expected, I found them responsive. They didn't have to say anything, their faces lit up. They were talented, they could sing. They excelled at sports, things that we don't really give them credit for. All right, there's dancing and so forth, the high life, I could do it as well as anybody. In fact, I danced naked 2 or 3 times in the jungle with a big bonfire and everyone clapping. Unfortunately, somebody took a photograph once and sent it to my boss. And my boss said, "Is that you?" I said, "Yes, it's me." He said, "Be careful." That was when I worked for Pan American Airways. They sent a picture of me completely naked in the jungle, all the chiefs up on the chair, all the people all around, and the big fire going, and what they call the high life, you dance through, very much like Ram Wong here, And that was one of my, anyway, I loved every moment of that. But I'm afraid I'm broad-minded to the point of obscenity. People think that I'm quite obscene, and I'm not. I'm a bit of a square, to be quite candid. I don't like filthy jokes or shocking people with bad words on the radio program. Lots of the jokes that we have on the program now are rather risky. And yes, but they're clever. They have a bit of substance to them. It's like a small joke. The girl didn't know she was raped until the check bounced. I mean, if your language is English, it's very funny. She didn't know she was raped until the bank didn't give them, the check was bad, so then she was raped. But these little innuendos, people like them. They're harmless. Most radio stations wouldn't tolerate them, that's quite true, but we've got away with it now for quite a long time here. And as I said before, when I look at TV and I see these terrible words and terrible dialogue, it's just done to shock. I don't like that at all. And then I become an all square again. But I like Thailand, I think, most of all, because I've been here. I mean, there's lots of things that I don't care about. I'm not particularly fond of Asian food. People get rather shocked at that, but I'm a bit sort of conservative with food. And I've always been on a kind of a diet, not a diet, but a way of life that's been very simple. Akmal has got used to it. He loves these big curries and things. All right, I love them too, but sometimes they don't love me. But I like to stay thin. I don't want to put weight on, and I don't want my brain to become fogged with bad diet. But I have found that over the years, you can extend your life by changing your style of living. 4 or 5 little meals a day, cut out all processed foods as much as possible, drink plenty of water. Unfortunately, the water, even boiled water, is not 100% effective. We have a distiller in the bathroom, and for many years I've depended upon distilled water. But all those small things keep you healthy. I had no health problems until I was 97. Everything in the book was just as it should be. Now it's not the same. There's a few things that have gone wrong. But getting back to your question, yes, I fell in love with London, and I took one of my technicians there, and he didn't want to come back. He fell in love with London too. And all countries have their difficulties. I mean, you spend a winter in London and you're frozen and your nose feels as though it's not part of your body. I love the climate. You had very cold weather at Christmas time. You'd never think Africa could be cold. It was freezing like London. But I liked it. It was a change of climate. And everything was colourful and cheap. You never quite got to know the people. I had a program. I used to meet the technicians in the middle of the town, Tangier, and from there we'd radiate to different little clubs and bars and take little extracts. There was no great setup. We just walked in, and if there was something nice that we saw, Actually, you'd go the day before, 2 days before, to find out what the club was doing, if it was worth going to. So then we'd meet in the centre of the town, all the little hour boys all around. It was like something out of a Jules Verne. I mean, it was just not real. When I look back on it now, it's incredible that I can be part of it. But we went round with a gang of technicians, a little bit here, a little bit there. Then it was brought back to the studio, all put together, and it was quite entertaining. I was quite surprised that there was no great preparations of microphones here. We just walked in. But I did have a very expensive piece of equipment which I bought from Sweden. I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, it was so good that no matter what you did, it sounded broadcast quality. That, when I look back on it, it was so amusing and so a little bit nerve-wracking sometimes because things would go wrong. In fact, a donkey broke loose once and took the cameras and all with it. I don't know how much it cost him for repairs, but the donkey's leg got mixed up with the cord and away went the equipment. Well, that night we had to cancel to get new equipment, but these kind of things happen in radio stations. And that was one program that sort of went with no great preparations. Now, of course, they're more particular. In those days, the listener was more satisfied with something more simple and more elementary and a bit more unprofessional, should we say, but it went off quite well. You hate the place. And if you worked in Bradford, you had to get up early in the morning and be a domestic. How awful it must be. Then they go to Australia. Woo, the sunshine is so wonderful. So it's sort of a different life altogether. So it's very difficult to become relative about what you like and what you dislike, because in each country there's something you like. Even in Caracas, I wasn't particularly safe or happy, but there was something I liked about the city. It was beautiful, the suburbs were lovely, and the few friends I had I loved very much. So therefore you can't say that you dislike something. But New York I admired, but you were pushed around a little bit, so you had to keep moving with the crowd. And it's the only time in my life that I opened the door, was faced with a gun and tied up. I never thought it would happen to me. I thought these things happen to other people. And also another incident I had that I thought would never happen to me, to be in a plane when something went wrong. And the captain's voice said, "We're expecting a crash landing." I said, but I expected everyone to go, "Woo!" But nobody sat in it, they just sat there. And I was sitting next to a nun. All right, she got her knitting out, and she went a bit faster perhaps, I don't know. But yeah, well, in those days, 1949 it happened. Pan American had Constellations. They were beautiful planes to look at, but they were propeller planes, and they only had 45 people. And I worked for Pan American Airways, and the plane had been repaired, and it was being taken to Europe, and I was a staff member going to their rest house in Lisbon for a 2-week holiday. And it was going to Paris first, and I would make my way to Lisbon. Well, on the way to Paris, the landing gear stuck. And getting it out, the whole plane rocked. I mean, everybody was sort of in their seats like the plates of the ball, and it still didn't say anything. So after flying around Paris for nearly 1.5 hours, I suppose, throwing off the fuel to lighten the load, finally it got a terrible jolt. And the captain's voice said, "The fault has been rectified now. We're landing in Paris in 20 minutes. Get ready to disembark at Orly Airport." And everybody clapped and cheered. I thought, in the play, what are they clapping and cheering? It was quite an experience.